house, and if any Indian tries to stop me, I'll blast him.
You know, the only thing more pathetic than Indians on TV is Indians watching Indians on TV.
Hey everybody, it's Ian, back again for another episode of Native Film Talk. It's been a little while, sorry for the brief hiatus. I was sick. I had no voice, I had terrible cough. So thankfully I'm back and feeling much better. What I wanted to talk about today is just Reservation Dogs, Season 1, Episode 1. This show is next level. This show is what I always wanted in a show, in a native show, which is depth, which is real representation of who we are today, you know, in our language and how we dress, how we talk, how we still mold in or like use our cultural aspects of who we are, and we blend it so effortlessly in how we talk, how we act, and what we believe. And it's just amazing. And the depth that this show is giving the characters with every episode is just phenomenal. And it's like something we've never seen. And so I was going to do an episode on Breaking Bad. I was going to do an episode on Better Call Saul. I was going to do an episode on Grey's Anatomy, you know, with Robert Mesa, and kind of like the native episode they had with Wes Studi. But after watching that after Res Dogs, it just felt like fucking table scraps, you know? And if you watch anything else, like, it feels like table scraps. I mean, there's still stuff, there's still pieces that we're going to hold on to. You know, we're still going to hold on to some aspects of Dances with Wolves. We're going to still hold on to some aspects of Last of the Mohicans. And then there's going to be shit that we just throw away forever, like Indian in the Cupboard, you know? But there's still going to be some things that just hold significant points in our history because they were maturation points. They were a foothold for us to continue to move forward. And I think that's what Reservation Dogs is going to be moving forward, is Rutherford Falls and Reservation Dogs are existing at the same time, and they're both going to propel representation in different directions, and I think that's phenomenal. And so while I liked Rutherford Falls, Reservation Dogs just hits different for me. So I wanted to dedicate the next 8 episodes of my podcast, which I've never done before. If you're new to the show, I dedicate an episode to a piece of movie, a piece of native representation in a film or in television. If it's a movie, I'll do a whole movie and just talk about it. If it's a TV show, I've only done one so far, but my method usually is going to be take that whole season and then talk about it. But in real time, I can't wait until the 8th episode to finally wait to talk about this. Because normally when I'm talking about a show like Longmire, the native representation is so sporadic that I can wait an entire season and then talk about the bits that are relevant. And that's usually what happens with my episodes, is I talk about the pieces that are relevant. And because the pieces that are relevant usually aren't the entire thing, it doesn't take an entire series to cover everything. I can watch a whole season and cover everything in one episode. If I did that with Reservation Dogs, I would make like a 9-hour episode, you know? It's just not feasible. So I said, let's do this. Let's do this. What I want to do is, just for those of you that are new and have not listened to my show before, that are here just because of Res Dogs, welcome. But usually how I structure my episodes are, I'll do an intro, you know, of the show, the movie. Do a quick, here's how it came about, here's how the native representation was talked about leading up to the film, after the film, here's the reception that it got, and critical reception. And then I'd go over the cast review, I do a plot recap, and then positives, negatives, and then final thoughts, and then the podcast is over. So let's just jump right into it. If you're looking for more information about how Reservation Dogs came about, this isn't the podcast to do it. I say that because I'm just going to really dive into the first episode and the show itself. Sterling Harjo has a podcast he runs called The Cuts with Sterling Harjo. He had a little mini-series, or Res Dog mini-series, where he invited all of his friends and writers, producers that worked on the show. So he invited Tazba Rose Chavez, who wrote and directed an episode and was a writer on the show. Bobby Wilson is a writer and was in episode 3 and directed episode 4. Tommy Pico, and Migsy Pinsino. And Migsy, you know, produced but also was in episode 5. I think that those offer more substance than I could. if you really want to deep dive and hear it from all these perspectives about how this show came about, go check out his podcast, The Cuts. Also, Sterling Harjo was on 2 podcasts that are pretty prevalent, that are non-native. He was on What the Fuck, Mark Maron's podcast, WTF. That is a massive podcast. That's like, that podcast has been around for years, 15 years, something crazy like that. And that's like, that's going to capture the most non-native ears, in my opinion. And so that's wild. That's a good perspective because it's a non-native interviewer. He grew up in New Mexico, Mark Maron, so he has like some perspective of like who Native people are, and he has, I think, tougher, maybe not tougher, but more drill down questions than you would like a regular non-native person who didn't grow up in the Southwest near Native people. So I think that was a good chat. Also, there's another podcast, if you remember Bobby Lee, who plays the IHS doctor in episode 2. He has a podcast called Tiger Belly that he runs with his girlfriend. And Bobby Lee and Sterling, they have a great conversation. It's more silly. You either love Bobby Lee or you hate him. And I happen to love Bobby Lee. So if you want to tolerate an interview that's more silly, more on the silly, fun side and goofy side, definitely recommend Sterling on Tiger Belly. And they talk a lot about Reservation Dogs, how the show came about. He talks about his friendship with Taika Waititi, how that started, where that blossomed into, and ultimately how it helped get Reservation Dogs off the ground. Real quick, Sterling and Taika, if you don't know, they've been friends for a long time. I want to say a little over 20 years. They met at a Sundance Film Festival, and while they met, they were like, "Hey, we're Indigenous," and they got connected through Bird Running Water. They were both Indigenous filmmakers, and through crafting their friendship, you're like, "Hey, you're from New Zealand, I'm from Oklahoma." It's crazy that there's so many similarities between our cultures and our upbringings and our communities. And a lot of that has to do with your relationship with colonial history, your people's relationship with colonial history. And so, like any space, if you're a native and you've ever been in a space where there's non-natives, you glom onto any non-native you can find, or any native you can find, sorry. So from stories I heard that Sterling told, is that's basically what happened with him and Taika. And they continue to remain friends. And when, Taika is where he is now, he did what you would hope Indigenous creatives and people do, is you lift people up with you, and that's exactly what he did with this show. He had an opportunity to pitch a show to FX, and he worked with Sterling to come up with, well, I shouldn't say come up with Reservation Dogs. He asked Sterling, do you have any ideas? And Sterling had Reservation Dogs, was kind of sitting on it, pitched the show, got the pilot. The pilot went well, and then they ordered the rest of the season, and the rest is history. And now, I'd be shocked if we didn't get a season 2. This thing's fucking amazing. I don't see us not getting at least a season 2 out of this. This show is just phenomenal. What I really like about this is it's not just a native thing. We had smoke signals in the past that was kind of like the closest thing to native representation. Now you look at it, and it's so dated. Smoke signals feel so dated. It doesn't really feel like real representation. It kind of just feels like close to representation, and so it's like monumental in that regard. It was still led by a native showrunner. It was still written by a native. So, and it was still like had an predominantly, it was like the big stars were native. That was like the first time we had ever done anything like that. But when you look at it, it's just like, it doesn't feel close like Reservation Dogs does. But what's even better is Sterling is going on these massive podcasts. He's going on WTF, Mark Maron's podcast. He's going on Bobby Lee's podcast. And I'm pretty sure he goes on Joe Rogan's podcast. He kind of mentions that in Tiger Belly. But Joe Rogan's backlog is so far out, I wouldn't be surprised if Sterling's episode doesn't come out until like the middle of September. But it sounds like Sterling is on Joe Rogan's podcast. He's on these massive platforms talking about Reservation Dogs, talking about this show about natives. And I think that's the most fascinating part about all of this, is non-natives are going to see this, and non-natives can finally see what we're about. Because, frankly, non-natives can watch smoke signals, and the jokes fly over their head. And they still fly over their head in Res Dogs, but it's culturally relevant. Like, they're not so, like, deeply... The jokes aren't so deeply rooted in the culture that you're like, oh, I completely missed that one. They might not get Dear Lady, I mean, I'm Navajo. I had to have people from Oklahoma explain to me what Deer Lady was, but it's the same shit. It's basically skinwalkers, basically Yanagloshis. It's a different kind of thing, but it's still witchcraft. It's still like yeah. And so that kind of stuff might go over, non-natives' heads. But if you're indigenous of any kind, you have something like that in your communities. Whether you're from South America, North America, New Zealand, you're gonna have something like the Deer Lady. And I think that's what's cool about this is this show is showing us that like indigenous representation, this is what it looks like. And I hope this paves the way for other indigenous creatives to get their stuff lit. And I'm positive it will. It's pretty cool. As far as pilots go, this was a pretty good pilot. I think it's nowhere near like Friday Night Lights, Westworld, Breaking Bad territory, but Lost territory, but it's up there. I mean, it's a good enough pilot. What I did like, what I think is fucking boss, is the first episode isn't called Pilot. If you follow television at all, you know that the first episode, the pilot episode, a lot of shows keep the name Pilot. Friends, Cheers, Breaking Bad, Friday Night Lights, Sopranos, Lost, like these are major shows, but you go to their very, very first episode and it's still titled Pilot. Instead, Sterling Harjo, Taika pulled a boss move and changed the first episode to fucking Res Dogs. So I just thought that was freaking awesome. I thought that was so cool. But you know what? Let's jump into it. So this episode was directed by Sterling Harjo. It was written by Sterling Harjo and Taika. So let's jump over the cast review. I'm just going to introduce the four, and the episodes to come, I'll talk about new people that they introduce, but for the most part, I'll just like skip over the four. This is like the only time I'll really talk about them to this length, unless there's like a major development with their career, like they're doing something, or they just got landed a job somewhere. So let's talk about it. Let's start with Bear Smallhill, DeFaro Wunatai. DeFaro's up and coming. DeFaro has yet to really be in anything huge. Like out of the four, Devry Jacobs is the one that has the most longest filmography. DeFaro and Paulina Alexis, who plays Willie Jack, they were both in this movie called Beans, and I've never heard of this movie called Beans, but this movie Beans, like I need to see this movie. It aired at TIFF last year. It's an indigenous film. Paulina and DeFaro co-starred in this one. I really need to see this one. But I guess that's like what their acting work prior to this. And DeFaro, I love him in this. He has such a depth. Bear Smallhill is a really, really good character, great-hearted individual, just wants to do what's best for his mom, wants to do what's best for his community, trying to find his place in the world, trying to find his place of being a man according to the world of basically the non-native world, and being a man fitting into a native community. What does that look like, especially when you have a deadbeat, out-of-work rapper dad? You know what I mean? So pretty cool to see that much depth in just a young native person, because you never see that. And I'm so excited to see that in this show. Next, we're going to talk about Lane Factor. So Lane Factor, who plays Cheese in this show, it's interesting because when we interviewed Angelique Midthunder a couple episodes ago, who did casting for this show, she mentioned that one of the four characters is someone that they basically plucked off the streets who had never acted before, and that's Lane Factor. Lane Factor has no filmography outside of Reservation Dogs. He has not done anything that's listed on IMDb prior to this. And this is his breakout role. It's like this is his first anything. And that's amazing that this show can pluck somebody out of Oklahoma and throw him up on a show that's on FX. I freaking love that. I love it. And then let's talk about Paulina Alexa. I keep saying Alexa. Paulina Alexis, who is probably the unanimous favorite of Indian country. Everyone loves Willie Jack. Like Willie Jack is their favorite character because everybody knows a Willie Jack. Everybody has a Willie Jack in their community. And what I love is Willie Jack is this character is, I don't want to say genderless, but this person is everywhere and every gender, and I think that's what's awesome is when Sterling was casting for this role, Willie Jack, they initially wanted to cast a male for this. But Paulina just killed it so bad. They were just killed it, and they were just like, you know what? Let's give it to her instead. We'll give it to her. She does this character justice. I want her to be in this. So Willie Jack was supposed to be a boy, and that didn't play out because Paulina is awesome. And now I can't imagine it not being Paulina. She is Willie Jack, like for all of time. Like she's like just like those laughing ladies in Smoke Signals, like with their cackle. Like there's so many like Willie Jack sayings and quotes and facial features that it's just she's Willie Jack now. But what's cool is Beans was her breakout role. Reservation Dogs, this is her second one. And Ghostbusters Afterlife, she has an acting credit in there. So she got work. She's getting work now. So we're gonna see more of Paulina Alexis. So and that's freaking awesome. And last, we're going to talk about Devry Jacobs. Devry is Mohawk. She's First Nations. She's from Canada. And so because like they have APTN and because Canada just really has more support when it comes to Indigenous work in film. A lot of the most well-known people come out of Canada. Gary Farmer, Graham Greene, Michael Grey Eyes. Like there's just more work in Canada, and APTN has a lot to do with that, the Aboriginal People's Television Network. But Devry Jacobs, her filmography is insane. Like she's worked in video games, she's worked in movies that are non-native, like TV miniseries. She was in an Assassin's Creed Lineage TV miniseries. She was in a TV show called Mohawk Girls, which I want to see at some point. She was like in The Walking Dead. She played Sam. Walking Dead Michonne, the video game. She was in that. She's in Jeff Barnaby's 2 films that he's done with her. The Rhymes for Young Ghouls and Blood Quantum. And she was obviously also in Rutherford Falls. If you've seen Rutherford Falls, you might have recognized her from that. She plays Jess Wells. So I think you need to look out for Devry because already her she has 3 extra things that have yet to come out that are going to come out in 2022. So this girl is busy. She is a busy, busy woman. And it's amazing to see someone like that just get more work because she deserves it. I mean, she's a fantastic actor. Because episode 5 just aired. If you want to see where I'm at with this, I wanted to do this 2 weeks ago, but I got sick, and so I've been sick for basically 2 weeks and unable to record. But even up to episode 5, I feel like Devry Jacobs' character, Alora Dannon, has so much depth, and we haven't even got into her backstory. We haven't even seen what her home life is like. We hadn't even seen how she came to meet the group. We haven't gotten any of that. But because her acting is so on point and so good, you can just see the depth of who this person is, who she's struggling to be. The writing is so great. You can see her struggle. Being an Indigenous woman on the res, trying to lead, but also trying to get the fuck out of there because she doesn't want to have happen to her friend Daniel happen to her. And so trying to lead, trying to be a woman, trying to be an adult and push off, but at the same time, still trying to hold on to her friendships. And, those friendships might come back to bite her and hold her back. And I think it's something that a lot of Indigenous people have to come to terms with at some point in your life. Do you cut ties with your friends? Do you realize they're holding you back? Or do you push on your own and push on with them and try to make it work, try to make your community better? Is it worth it? And I think even just through these few episodes, you can see all that, and I love it. And then we have Zahn McClarnon. Zahn McClarnon is a recurring character in this, and I'm going to talk about him right now. He plays Big. He's a tribal police officer. Zahn McClarnon, for non-native people, for non-native viewers, the casual viewer, Zahn McClarnon probably has the most recognition, outside of Gary Farmer, I would say, and Wes Studi. But Zahn McClarnon, who is from Fargo Season 2, most notably for a lot of people. He was in Westworld. He was in Longmire. He plays a tribal cop in Westworld. I'm sorry, in Longmire too, and Longmire also. So I think it's pretty freaking cool to see him in this, playing that role. I think he plays a freaking phenomenal cop. He plays a great, phenomenal Columbo cop. If you could blend Columbo and make him native, it's pretty cool. He just plays this affable kind of, you can't really tell, is this dude really smart, or is he just happy to have a job and just, he seems like a goof up. He seems like a fuck up a little bit, but he also seems like he really knows what's going on. And he's also a little bit of a superstitious person, kind of a conspiracy nut. So I'm really excited to see where they develop that character into. And if you've seen episode 5, you get a glimpse into how he got into where he is now, and I think it's pretty awesome. So I normally don't take that long. Normally in my cast reviews, we're 19 minutes in right now. Jesus, I haven't even talked about the show yet. But the cast reviews, I usually, when it comes to TV and film, it's usually a bunch of non-natives, and there's like one native. But this is like the whole cast is native. Everybody that's worked on this is native. I try to talk about like the people that have worked on the show that were native, that were consulted, but this is all native, so it's a little different for me. I'm still trying to feel my way through this because this has never happened before. Usually, you get a Val Kilmer, Johnny Depp type who Thunderheart, fucking Lone Ranger and Tonto, where after the movie they're like, oh, I'm reconnecting to my native roots. In the process of doing this movie, I've discovered that I have native roots and I have native ancestry, and I'm trying to reconnect. Usually I'm trying to like sift through that controversy and think like, is that what they use to like land their role, like some kind of native ancestry? But because there's no like drama with any of that, there's no pretendians, there's no Kelsey Aspill, it's Taylor Sheridan kind of crap going on. It's refreshing to listen to a showrunner say like, yeah, we casted all native, and I'm like, yeah, you did. I know you did. Because I talked to the casting director, and that's what she wanted. That's what the showrunner wanted. It's what the executive producer wanted. That's the whole foundation of the show, and it's fucking awesome. So finally, without further ado, let's get into the plot. What I love is it pays its respects to smoke signals from the very first scene. First we hear the radio, and then we hear taking it back to K-Res Radio, Randy Pione, smoke signal style, but instead it's K-49 Territory Jam saying, hey, everyone out there in Indian Territory, Oklahoma. He then says something I think is awesome, which is, I'm going to take you back to my snagging days with the Stooges. I want to be your dog. And then he says something that caught me way off guard. I want to be your dog. Sounds like a shapeshifter song to me. Anyway, take it away, motto. I think that was great. Because first of all, in the big three, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, it's probably the first time you're ever going to hear like shapeshifter just dropped casually like that. And motto was dropped like casually like that. And one of my favorite things about the dialogue in this, when people say like motto and there's like random Creek, I assume it's Creek, random Muskogee words that are thrown in. There's no dialogue like bar. There's no subtitles like giving you a translation. It's just like, hey, this is how these people talk. It's just blended into the everyday language. It's just blended into how they talk. And I love that. That's what I want to see. I want to see representation of how these people talk. There's no explanation of like, oh, excuse me, can you tell me what motto means? Like, I'm not from that community, but just based on how they're acting, when Bear gets handed a meat pie by Alora, when she hands it to him in his bedroom and he just says motto, like, I'm like, okay, well, I assume I know what that means now. You know what I mean? So I think that's freaking awesome. And the shapeshifter, it's such a... I love that it's present in every... I shouldn't say I love because it's fucking terrifying. But like, it's in every indigenous culture in some capacity. Some kind of shapeshifter is there. Here in this show, it comes in the form of Deer Lady. And thanks to my friends from Oklahoma, I got educated on what Deer Lady is, what Deer Lady does. And so when I saw Deer Lady, finally, or when I heard that Deer Lady was going to be in it, I'm just like, holy shit, In Navajo culture, we have like Yenokloshis, we have skinwalkers, and it's like in every culture there's like some form of skinwalker, regardless if you're from South America, North America, New Zealand. If you're indigenous, you have something like this. And I think that's what's like, I think everyone can resonate with the idea of like, I want to be your dog, huh? Sounds like a shapeshifter song to me. But then flash to the kids, they're trying to steal a chip truck. They're trying to steal the truck to get it to the meth heads, to the scrapyard, to the salvage yard, so they can get money because they want to build up their funds to get the hell out. They want to try to build up this pot of money to get away from their res and move on to the California. That's the whole premise of the show. That's the whole purpose of their existence up to this point, is their friend Daniel had passed away. We don't understand why. We don't learn why yet. So they're just trying to get money. So they steal this chip truck. And what I love is when they first get in the chip truck, when the coast is clear, Alora is told by Bear, like, hey, put your seatbelt on. And she was like, seatbelt? We're stealing a fucking chip truck. And I love when she puts it on. She says it just like a native woman. Like, Jesus Christ, okay. And like just clips the thing in. Well, it's just a line of just like, God, I could just hear the native delivery in that. Like just a fed up native woman just talking shit, Like I loved it. Calls him Mr. Safety. But I think why this is important that they included that little piece in there is these aren't bad kids. Like they see a means to an end. They see an opportunity to get the hell out of the res, and they're devastated. They're mourning over their friend. They see an opportunity to get out and avoid the same fate that he saw. So they're not fuck the law. They're not fuck the police. They're probably land back, but they're not these are just native kids. They respect the rules. They say fuck the police, but they'll say hey, what's up, big? You know what I mean? And so I think that's a cool thing. The cool distinction with native people is they respect the rules, but they know when they need to be broken. And what's great about the route is it shows something that all natives know about, is just the inadequacy of tribal police. If you're a tribal police officer and you're listening, this isn't directed at you. This is directed at the system as a whole and how it's perceived by the native community. But to have a chip truck that is just stolen dragging the ramp that they couldn't put in, they dragging the damn ramp down the street with the sparks trail behind it, with random bags of chips still popping out of the road, leaving a trail to tell you hey, where's this chip truck going to end up? Can't even see it. Freaking Zon McLaren Big is staring down at his phone, looking at a JFK assassination conspiracy video, and just completely misses it. There's so many fucking tribal police, fucking Navajo PD, at least on my res, there's so many jabs taken at them for their inadequate service, their inability to be always late, to never show up when they're needed, to never be there when they're needed. And so that was just a good exemplification of that, and I loved it. But shouts out to tribal police. You guys doing good job. And what I really liked about this too is while they're in the chip truck, after they jack it, after they finally all get in and take off successfully, fucking Willie Jack already cracking into a bag of chips. He's just yo, we got this free bag of chips. I'm just going to dig into this because hot chips are life. And I think what was funny is, and I didn't anticipate this, I didn't anticipate needing this, is Skoden Studis. So the four eventually pull up to the entrance of the junkyard. And they're okay, what do we do now? And then they eventually get the gates open, whatever. And Alora says, Skoden. And, I'm sorry, Bear says, Skoden. And Alora says, Studis. And Skoden Studis is relatively recent. I would say within the past 4 years, that it's become a part of Native American, I don't know, vernacular, if that's the right word. But just Skoden, Studis, it started somewhere. That's why you have West Studis and Skoden with that drunk Indian dude ready to fight, that meme. It's so a part of our culture now that it made it into this. And I don't know how I feel about that. I say Skoden. I've never said Skoden not jokingly. If that makes sense. So I thought it was kind of odd that these kids use it. I mean, I'm sure they're being joking too. It's being used ironically. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but I've never used it seriously. Of all right, let's go then. It's you always say it as a way to make the other person laugh. It's never done intentionally. So I thought, but regardless, I thought it was freaking cool to see Skoden Studis, and it's it's peppered in throughout this entire show. Skoden Studis, and I think it's great. I think what is great to take a time out is there's no period piece Indians. This is how people talk today. There's no Indian speak. There's no, hey, this is the, there's no broken English. There's no Indian speak. There's no firewater. There's no, hey, you're off the reservation, chief, that kind of bullshit. You're looking at people, how they exist today on their res. It might not be exactly how it is on every res, but in this particular location in Oklahoma, that's how it is. That's how they dress today. No one's wearing a headdress or a breechcloth unless it's done ironically, unless it's done for satire, like Dallas Goldtooth's character, but we'll get to that later. And so they eventually sell it. The guy to Kirk Fox's he kind of runs a salvage yard, and Kirk Fox is this wise, I say wise, he's this know-it-all white dude that every native person knows. He just can't shut up, can't tell you what they learned that morning, and can't not tell you something about being native that they heard somewhere. He seems like that character to me. because he tells these kids, Alora Dannon, because she says, Alora eventually tells her what her name is, Alora Dannon, like in Willow, and it's like, they had to have twins on the movie because can't have a crying baby on set, so they swap out the baby so one doesn't get tired, blah 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 blah. And I think what's interesting about that is, yeah, no fucking shit, like Alora Dannon is her name. You don't think she knows that? You don't think she's been schooled on that? If her parents like love that movie enough to name her Alora Dannon, you don't think that's the first time she hasn't heard that? Like, that's probably the 100th time she's heard that story and just, oh god. But of course he's got to be like, hey, look at this knowledge I have, marvel at my brain capacity. And he does that later on with the hoka hey children, hoka hey. And his character does that throughout, and he's wearing this freaking choker the entire time. I have no idea what this dude's all about, but he's a good odd character, and he has great delivery, great comedic timing, and so I really like it. So next, they eventually say like, hey, can we take the chips? You want the truck. You just want the truck for salvage. We want the chips, and then so they can continue selling, so they can keep their hustle up. So they take those chips back to their hideout. And what's great about the hideout is this is where we learn about the four. We're given the backstory of we learn about Daniel. Daniel is their long lost friend, and he passed almost a year ago. And, Bear's holding the camera that apparently he's using for a school project. But in this, we learn that the group can effectively communicate using sign language. My guess is Daniel might have been might have had a disability of some kind. Maybe he couldn't speak, or maybe one of the group's family members is hard of hearing, and they have to use American Sign Language to communicate. But I don't know. That's a little bit of a side. But why this video is important is we get a glimpse into their lives, into why they're stealing. This is why we learn that they're going to California. This is why we're learning that Daniel, this place killed him. We got to get the F out of here, basically. And so I really like this. I really, really like that. And I love that, Willie Jack just drops a fuck bitches get money, randomly into the video. It's such a native thing to do, to just think oh, fuck yeah, filming a music video. Let's throw this shit in there. And yeah, so that was great. And then they go to the cul-de-sac. They're selling stuff. They're selling their chips. And as they're selling the chips, we get an introduction to Bear's mom. And I think it's interesting that they delve into this single mom. It's not a culture, but just being a native single mom, what that really looks like. They don't really cover it in this one, because right now it's the first episode. She's like, where are you going to go? And it's like, oh, I'm going out with my friends. I'm going to go find you a dad. We've seen that story played out over and over and over. But what I'm excited about for this show is we're going to see what it's like to be a matriarch. Yeah, there's no man in the house, but what is it like when the women are already the head of the household? What is it like when, even if there is a man there, the woman's going to be running shit anyway? So how much of an impact does it have or don't have when the woman doesn't need a man? Truly, because this is a matriarchal community where she does know how to hunt. She does know how to fish. So I'm real excited to see that explored for the first time ever, because native women in film and television are usually hypersexualized. And we see evidence of that later on in the show. Of how native women are viewed as exotic. They're viewed as other. They're viewed as this thing to be sought after, almost like this prize, this big game hunting thing, a fucking thing you can mount on your wall, And so I really think it's interesting that finally we're getting this to this level. It kind of sucks that if you've seen any further episodes of Res Dogs, they go in so many different directions, because I kind of just want to through line, but they're building so much depth and character. They're building this massive world, and it's so awesome. So I say it kind of sucks, but it doesn't, because it's the first time we're getting this much depth with all these characters. You think oh, the mom's just going to be around. It's no, they're going to build out her character. They're going to build out Bear's character. And I think that's freaking awesome, is that everybody is getting a fair shake. And what I love about their interaction before Bear and his mom talk, he goes and does the opposite of what happens in movies where you have kids that are criminals, kids that are gangbanging, where Bear, instead of reaching into his mom's wallet, her billfold, and taking money out of it, he goes to her billfold and he puts money into it. And that shows like Bear's character. That shows where Bear's heart is, even though he's committing crimes. And so I think what's cool too is it's a very small thing, but Bear's mom's like the whole reason Bear goes to his mom, like runs in his mom, because he has to go take a piss. He has to go to the restroom. And his mom is using the one bathroom in the house to put her makeup on. And like shouts out to everyone that grew up with one bathroom in the house. But that like small thing is like something a lot of people can identify with, like having done that. You either have one bathroom in the house or you have one working bathroom in the house, and the other one is just for like, you know, the mirror that's there, just for the vanity mirror. Because forever it's out of commission. Because yeah, when your uncle stops traveling, he says he's gonna come fix it for me, you know, that kind of shit. And so go back to the gang. They're selling Flamin' Flamers for 50 cents. Basically look like Cheetos to me. Actually, no, they look more like, I don't know. They look like hot potato chips almost. I don't know. I've never seen chips like that. Maybe it's an Oklahoma thing. But this is where we're introduced to Mike and Lil Mike and Funny Bones character, Moose and Miko. And these guys are like the initiating event. Like they're the ones later in the episodes that tell the Indian Mafia, hey, they're the Res Bandits. Or they've already told the Indian Mafia, like, those are the Res Bandits. Had they not said that there are Res Bandits, had they not said that they're a gang, this whole thing would have been avoided. This whole show would have never happened. But these twins, you know, told the Indian Mafia who these kids were, and starts all this, you know, nonsense. I say nonsense. It starts all this conflict between the Indian Mafia and the Reservation Dogs. So I think it's pretty cool. And I love that in this scene, there's a scene that there a line rather where the very first customer that they have sees the sign, walks up, gives him 50 cents, and takes the chips, and then Willie Jack drops it into their bank, and the first person, you know, Willie Jack says, "Go tell your friends," and she says, "I don't have any friends." "Well, go get some then. Fuck." I love that because I was like, well, go get some then. Fuck. Like that tough, mean, angry tone. Like I've heard that my entire life. And I can't tell you off the top of my head who says that. But as soon as I heard that, I'm just like, oh God, I know that person. That person I grew up with. That person's in my house. It might not be an entire persona, but there's definitely aspects where people, you know, well, go get some then. Fuck. I'll slap you out right here. Shit. And I love it. I love Willie Jack's character. It's so real. It's so authentic. And it's so representative of who Native people are on the res. And so what's cool is Big comes up, and this is where we kind of like see his conspiracy theory side. He comes up and he starts talking about like, all right, shit's getting real bad, guys. You know, I'm just came to tell you, you know, it's bad right now. Kids are stealing copper off the light poles, or jacking weed gummies, or jacking rides in the middle of the night from driveways, even stealing food from grocery stores. One, to say like, hey, stuff's really happening, stuff's really going down, keep your eyes peeled. But also to show that these kids aren't just stealing a chip truck, like, and this is their first rodeo. They've done this. They have a history of like doing things to keep the hustle going, to try to get out, to try to go to California. And it gives you a better understanding of like how close they could be to getting what they need to be doing, because they have some stuff that has actually yielded fruit. Like they're not just crafting plans and just talking about it. Like they're actually getting out and doing this shit. And what was so my favorite part, this isn't Native anything related, but my favorite part when Big is recapping their past crimes, when they had stole the weed gummies from I can't remember, from the old lady's porch, and they had took it and they're standing there and they're just high as fuck. And my favorite thing is when Willie Jack says, "Yo, I gotta call my mom." Oh man, that yo. Oh, girl, I've been there. Like, god damn, that panic was real. Like, yo, I gotta call my mom. Oh, I've had some terrible high experiences. I have some terrible trips, and so I know exactly what that high feels like. And when she said that, like, I had to play it back like 2 or 3 times. Just I could not stop laughing. That like panic of just like, how much longer? How long has it been? Oh my god, it's only been 5 minutes. And I'm gonna die. I can feel my heart beating so hard that it's outside of my chest. Like, is there an earthquake? Is everything gonna be okay? Oh god, I'm so thirsty, even though I'm like drinking water constantly. Anyway, so back to Big. I think what's cool about Big is he brings in the supernatural. What's cool about this show is Big brings in the supernatural from day one, from episode 1. Because he says all this stuff. He's like, these kids are stealing copper. These kids are, robbing these people from with weed gummies, taking rides, committing grand theft auto, stealing from the grocery store. But that's not even what makes me worried. Old man Fixico down the street said he saw a deer lady. And that's what really freaks him out. And that's what makes him like, ooh, yeah. Like he just saw a snake. Like I just saw a snake. That's how I react. I'm just like, ah. And so I think it's cool that he brings us in, but also at the same time, the audience is like, this guy fucking watches JFK assassination videos on his on the clock. How am I supposed to know this guy's real? And so, but Dear Lady's real shit, as we eventually learn. So Dear Lady is scary AF. So we need to keep an eye out. So the very next scene after they're done selling their chips, my favorite part of the movie, they come up, favorite part of the first episode rather. They're walking down the street. Alora's counting their money. Like, hey, we could get to California, sooner than we thought. And then the Indian mafia comes up, rolling in a black Impala. All the windows are blacked out, and they slow roll to like cut them off in front of that the sidewalk that they're walking to. And they pull out these paintball guns that look like real guns, and this looks fucking exactly like the Boys in the Hood scene at the end of the movie. Like, as the windows rolled down and the guns came out, like, in my head, I was yelling, Ricky! I was just like, run, buddy! But alas, they were paintballs. Thank God they were paintballs. And what's cool is they get shot up. Bear does recreates Platoon, getting shot up. But my favorite scene in this is here, because he goes to the spirit world, this whatever spirit world, because Bear is like Muskogee, but he has this random, seemingly Lakota William Knife Man, aka Spirit, like coming up in through the fog. And I love this character because this is my favorite character, because it's captured with the first thing that Bear says to him. He wakes up, he gets up, he sees the figure coming toward him, and he's like, are you Crazy Horse or Sitting Bull? Oh, no, I'm not one of those awesome guys. And that tells you everything you need to know about Spirit. This is next level writing. This is like Tropic Thunder, Robert Downey Jr.'s character. I'm the dude playing the dude disguised as another dude. Like, Spirit is purposely dressed as a stereotype, so the audience thinks like, oh, I've seen this before. Oh, spiritual advisor. Oh, sage wisdom. But he's not even from Bear's tribe, so this makes zero fucking sense. He's not his ancestor. Thankfully, that's never addressed, but it's implied. He's just some random warrior. I'm more of your unknown warrior, is what he says. But like, he's not even from his lineage. He's just a wandering Lakota warrior, because all Indians are either Navajo, Lakota, or Inuit, right? And so, what's great is he leans into the stereotype, but also does it in a way that makes it okay for people to laugh at. Like, he's not a stoic Indian. He's not a noble savage. He calls his horse a little shit. He says stuff like, he says modern language like rugged, marinated on that, but for real though, like, he says like everyday language, which is weird to see dressed as a leather and feathers period piece Indian to be using everyday language, but that's great, because he says fuck, he calls his horse a little shit, because and when he describes the battle at Little Bighorn, it's like a way that you've heard, but how you really want to talk about it. Because when he talks about when he sees Custer right before he dies, right before he met his demise in the real world, he was like, I saw that yellow hair guy, son of the morning star. Fuck, I hated that guy. Like, I love that. I love that he said that, because that's the shit that's like, that's real. Instead, it's like, it's romanticized. It's made out to be this, okay, it's a good day to die. That's all Hollywood gloms onto. You know, they romanticize Custer's death. When in reality, there's fucking gopher holes everywhere because there's gophers all over the place, and it's probable, it does happen in regular life where your horse can step into a gopher hole and can fall, it can trip, and then you can go, it can go ass over tea kettle and land right on you and kill you. And that's how Spirit meets his demise. And I think it's so on point with who his character is because he's not Sitting Bull. He's not Crazy Horse. There are other Indians out there that just died. There are other ancestors that don't have names that we don't talk about that are just dead. And so I think it's great that people are like, oh yeah, there are other Indians other than Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull. Huh. I guess I never really thought about that. And the best thing I like about this too is my favorite part of all this is making fun of the generations of terrible representation of period piece Indians, because natives, this is what natives get a chance to do as soon as they can control the narrative. The very first chance they get, they put a period piece Indian on screen, and instead of making him do his "how white men go that way," blah blah blah, you know, their Indian speak, the noble savage, they say fuck that. You know, he uses everyday language because he's a spiritual advisor. And if he's a spiritual advisor for today, if he is a figment of Bear's imagination, that's what he's going to sound like to Bear. He's not going to sound like, I don't know, like some fucking Indian out of the Searchers. He's not going to sound like that out of some John Ford Western. He's not going to be wearing red face. He's just going to be a native dude, like talking shit and being goofy, being silly. And I love that he makes fun of the war cry, makes fun of his relationship with his horse. You know, this isn't fucking Avatar where you're like bonded for life once you touch your braid to the tail of the animal. That's not romanticized like that. Like, shit happens. It's still an animal. Yes, we have reverence for the animal. Yes, we have a connection with the animal because it was gifted to us by the creator. But fuck, it's still an animal. It fucks up. It steps in the gopher holes and kills us. And I love that the spirit's just like, little shit. I'd still be alive if it wasn't for you. I could have celebrated with my peers. We could have had a good time. And so I also love that Spirit acknowledges the ridiculousness of his outfit. He's like, yes, this is appropriate for walking. This is appropriate for battle. But for the rest of eternity, like, if Spirit World's cold, my nipples are always hard. He's like, bro, we wore other clothes. But in Westerns, all we ever saw was what Dallas is wearing. Because that's what white people wanted natives to look like. Leather and feathers. It's like, oh, there's some Edward Curtis pictures out there. That's what they all must look like. That's what they all must dress like all the time. Not, you know, putting aside the theater, putting aside the fact that a lot of those pictures are staged and purposely made to look like, oh, this is the Indians. We must capture them before they die. Capture them for posterity. We didn't dress like that all the time. There were specific reasons why we did that. And I just love it. I just love it. I like Dallas Goldtooth reprised a lot of his, well, really specifically from the role of his in the Wolfpack audition, the 1491's video. There's so much of that character in this, and I love it. So Bear wakes up, and ultimately this spirit and interaction with Bear is like, you and your thuggy ass friends can steal and do shit, but what are you doing for your people? It's about your people at this point. You can go do shit for yourself, but what are you really going to be given back for? Or what are you going to be given back? You know, are you just going to do bad just to do bad, or are you going to try to do something with it? So then Bear starts to realize, like, okay, let me think about that. And when he wakes up, my favorite thing is Willie Jack. Willie Jack, when they're all like, hey, you okay? And she just says, sober up, as you're coming to. I fucking hate that, because my entire life, somebody could fall off a damn house and have a concussion and, no joke, be injured. And as you're coming to, if you're with a bunch of native people, somebody, hey, sober up. Oh, man. It's great. I love that. The small stuff like that that this show has, like, I just can't get over that I'm actually seeing that on screen. And then we get back to the hideout. We learn a little bit more about their friend, how he died. Not necessarily how he died, but that it's because of the res. It's because of the community. It's because of the place. They got to get the hell out. And this is where Bear's conversation with Spirit starts to take hold, because he's like, we got to get the hell out of here. Don't be the bad guy. Get back to your community. And Alora, this is where the rift starts with the group. Because Alora is like, I don't know about you all, but I'm getting the fuck out. California is my destination. I'm going there with or without y'all, basically. And Bear, asks her, what if we're the bad guys? We're stealing stuff. Yeah, we're getting ours, but, what do we do? Are we the bad guys? And Alora's like, no. And I'm going to quote her on this one, because this is one of the most powerful things that has been said in any television show, any movie with natives in it. This place is shit. Fuck this town, Bear. You don't owe anyone anything, okay? Fuck the village. Fuck the people in it. And Bear then asks, what about Daniel? And Alora says, if Daniel was here, he wouldn't have. I'm sorry. And then Alora says, that's why Daniel's gone, because this place killed him. And you know what? I'm not letting it kill me. I'm getting out with or without you all. Applause break, because this is real. This isn't these poor natives, you got meth and you don't have access to running water, and isn't it sad that what we did to your people 200, it just hurts me to think what happened to your people, and can you believe the government is No, none of that. This is natives having an actual conversation about what it's like to live on a reservation. It fucking sucks. It's your homeland. And it's where your family's from. It's where all your people are from. So you're always going to have to go back to it. But it fucking sucks. There's no opportunity there. The opportunity that is there is within helping your community. And your community can want the help or not want the help. So you're always against odds. And this show is going to go into that. And this show does go into that. And Alora is a lot like me. Alora is where I was when I was in high school. I was just fuck this place. Only place I'm going to get anywhere is not here. So I'm getting as far away from the reservation as possible. But Bear, he's at odds. He's like his mom. His mom's there. He wants to take care of his mom. You can tell he has this protective instinct over his mother. What am I going to do if I leave? I can't just up and leave like Alora. I got responsibilities. My dad's not around. What if my dad comes back? I want to be here when he gets back. He's torn in so many different directions. But this is exactly what we've been waiting for. This kind of depth and this kind of dimension to native people. Fucking finally. I love it. And it's such a real conversation. And the next what's crazy too is they introduce supernatural shit in this show from the first episode. Because later that day, Bear is going to his house and he sees somebody, it's dark, and he sees somebody down the street standing under a streetlight, and he just says Daniel, and then he closes his eyes really tight, and then he opens it again, and then he's gone. Yeah, I love it though. I love it because and then the next day, Alora's like, "Hey, you're right. Let's go get the money back." And so they try to get the money back. Go to the junkyard. Everything's been already ransacked. It's already been scrapped. And so what's interesting here is Kirk Fox's character. He goes and tells the kids, hey, you lost this one, but you live to fight another day. Hoka hey, children. It's Lakota for 'tis a good day to die. And so first of all, I don't think that's true. That's some Hollywood shit. Because Crazy Horse, at the battle, did say, what did he say? Hoka hey, it's a good day to die. And, people confuse Hoka hey to mean it's a good day to die. From what I understand, online, from actual native people, I didn't actual Lakota person. So if there's a Lakota person or somebody knows that's listening to this and probably punching their dashboard he's not getting it right, I apologize. But from what I understand, it's just a battle cry to push forward. It's not 'tis a good day to die, but that's what it's romanticized into, and that's what Kirk Fox is regurgitating, and just has to tell these kids some Indian shit every time he sees them, because hey, who else am I going to tell this to? And I love that Willie Jack is just but we ain't Lakota. And Kirk Fox is nobody's perfect. I think it's so cool that they just have little jabs like that. That people get pissed. Natives get pissed when you call them something else. I'm Navajo, which is pretty prevalent. So, and I live in Phoenix right now. So for the most part, people always get it right when they hear I'm native. First question they ask is, "Well, are you Navajo?" But I don't know what that feels like to be something else. Something else. I don't know what that feels like to be another native like tribe and get mistaken for another one. And so that sucks, I'm sure. The next scene is really the last scene of the episode, where the gang is all dressed up. It's now the anniversary of their friend Daniel's passing, and they're standing over his picture. They're dressed like the characters in Reservoir Dogs, and they're just like sad. They're just mourning. And what's cool is they're smudging like kids. There's no adults there facilitating this. Like, they got their own abalone shell, they got their own sage, and they're smudging. Now, I'm Navajo. I don't really, we don't really do that. So this is like a piece of the culture that's like way different. I've never smudged before, like this in this particular way using sage. We use different stuff, but it's the same thing. Like, they're praying. It's a method of prayer. And the fact that there is no explanation, there's no hold on, time out, Lisa Simpson TED Talk kind of thing. There's none of that. And there's nobody pulling the audience aside saying, okay, the reason why we do this is, it's just done. Because that's how it's done in communities. You smudge, you pray, and it's just a part of life. You don't pull people aside and explain what's going on. You don't put people in leather and feathers to say, like, okay, you have to know these people are Indian, so we're going to make them look Indian. And I love it. So as the gang leaves their hideout and they're walking down the street, they see the Indian mafia drive by, and they got copper hanging out the back of their trunk. And this is where the rift is like really starting. Because it's like, okay, you guys can come in, shoot us a paintball, say we're on your turf, whatever the fuck, But now you're taking from our hustle. Now you're in the way of us leaving California. So it's now a fight. And this is where Moose and Miko, they come and tell them, like, hey, since you didn't like the name that we said you had, Reservation Bandits, we're going to call you, we told them your name was Reservation Dogs. And that's how they get their name of their gang. They're a group. They're not really a gang. They're a group. And that's how the first episode ends, really. Ends with, what's funny is Chi saying, can I be Mr. Camouflage? But I really liked it. I really liked this first episode. So let's get started with some positives. Overall positives, the clothes. Did you notice the clothes? Of course not. Nobody was wearing leather. Nobody was wearing feathers. These kids just dressed like kids. If it was any other show, they'd be wearing Pendleton shit, have a cowboy hat on, have braids every single scene that they're in, make it known that they're Indian. But they all dress differently because all Native kids have different personalities. They all talk differently because Native kids have different personalities. They have different upbringings. Their families are all different. Their family could be from different communities. They could be mixed race. They could be mixed from mixed Native nations. Their fluency level of their native language could be different in their community. The region where they live in could have an influence on how they talk. The life experience and education level of that family could be different. Whether or not they go to church or not. Like, how they talk and how they act, it's all different. We're all over the place because of we all have some similar experiences because of our relationships with like colonial history, but for the most part, every Native person is different, and they captured that in this first episode for the first time ever. Because if this was like run by white people, they probably would have all looked the same, had the same haircut, maybe had like the same clothes but like different colored shirts, just to set them apart so people know they're different. And this is next level, Biggest positive for me is Dallas Goldtooth's character Spirit. That's easily my favorite character, maybe of all time. Not all time. There's a list that I have in my head of like my favorite characters, and it's Bumper from Blood Quantum. If you haven't seen Blood Quantum, highly recommend it. Bumper from Blood Quantum, and then I'd say this one, Spirit, Dallas Goldtooth's character, and then the goats. It's still Magua, And I would put the Sphinx from Mystery Men in there too, because that's a legendary character, and Wes Studi absolutely kills that role, but that's for another time. Another positive is they just talk normal. We cuss, we listen to hip-hop, we wear regular clothes. I grew up wearing graphic t-shirts, but I also had sheep in my backyard with a basketball goal, and like 7 to 9 of us like growing up in a double-wide trailer. That's like normal life on the res, And And I love that. I don't know. I just love that it's like it captures res life, like random roosters like walking around town, like people riding their horse down the street, down the middle of a paved street. I love that. Like that's life. One thing that's really random that shouldn't be a positive but is a positive. I love that in the rival gang, the Indian Mafia, there's a white Steve. And there's a white kid and they called him White Steve. Every native community has a random white dude like that. That's like because he's like born and raised there, but people still acknowledge him as like white whatever. Hey white boy, hey white Steve. I think that's great. That's like captures like real life. As far as negatives go, I would say the criticism. I've seen criticism that this isn't representative of all native people. It's like, yeah, no fucking shit. It's like you feel like this show represents Indian country, and that's good. But this is also the second thing. I would consider the first like big show Rutherford Falls, and then there's this one. It's showing life in Oklahoma. And because of our history with colonialism, like I said, there's going to be some similarities that we see. There's also going to be, frankly, some pan-Indian shit that you're going to see. Like some stuff that's just like, you just understand as a native. That's like, just because that's a part of native culture. Skoda Studis. And then, so it's not going to capture the nuance of all of our people. You know, I'm Navajo. We don't like catfish at all in our res. I mean, we like catfish, I guess. But we don't have catfish anywhere in our res. Unless it's like stocked in some random pond. So, but we also don't have like communities butted up right next to ours like it is in Oklahoma. So it's a very different upbringing than what you're seeing in this show. Whereas like there's this huge melting pot of cultures and people because you're butted up right next to each other. You interact with white people, black people, Hispanics, people from other countries, and the Navajo res just doesn't have that. So it's like, I'm not saying every tribe or every place is like more like the Navajo res than it is Oklahoma. I'm just saying it's different. It's different. And I've seen people like throw shade at this show because of that. And it's like, dude, it's not going to capture everything. Like, this is the first step. This is showing everyone that natives have a lot to tell. Indigenous people have a lot to tell. We just need to keep giving them a chance. And I'm excited. I think my negative so far, I'm going to be very honest, is like the plot. It's kind of like all over the place. It's just like telling these like short stories in different directions so far. But you know what? Fuck it. Like, it still makes me happy to watch every episode. I still can't wait for Sunday at 9 o'clock when the new episode drops. So clearly I'm not that invested in the plot. It's not that big of a deal. I just want the payoff at the end. Do they go to California or do they not? I'm positive we get a season 2, so we'll see where this goes. And at the same time, this show is maturing, so it's good. You know what? This negatives part, it wasn't even a negative in the way that I normally talk about. It was like I'm like reviewing negative people's views on this show, I guess. One last positive. We're never in the way of white people progressing, and that's usually what we are. We're in the way of some shit. We're in the way of progress, like it's manifest destiny. It's usually what we're in the way. We're circling, you know, we're trying to ambush the white people. We're trying to keep our land, and we're in the way of westward expansion. But no, it's not like that. So, final thoughts. This is the first episode of Reservation Dogs, and Reservoir Dogs can sit down forever. I don't ever want to hear anybody refer to Reservoir Dogs as Res Dogs in my life. The real Res Dogs has arrived. And I love this show. It's not trying to be anything other than it is. It's not trying to make up for lost time and do massive, crazy stuff. It's just, you can see it. Indigenous creatives are like, finally, I got my shot. I'm going to tell my jokes. I'm going to do what I want to do. I want to do it my way. And I love that Sterling Harjo has this mindset of like, if this is going to be the only time this is going to happen, I want to do it the right way. I want to bring Indigenous people on only. I want to have only Native writers, actors, directors, producers, costume designers, set, you know, like I want it to be Native from head to toe as much as possible, and I love it. And I also like that there's no white guilt shit in this. Like, I don't like that we do. I mean, we're not the ones controlling the reins. It's like the overcorrection when we're trying to tell native stories now it's like, look what we did to these people. Oh my gosh, can you believe how much of a dire strait these people are in? It's like, no, this is life today and how they've evolved in their culture. To be assimilated, yes. To be, but I would say more adapted. How they adapted to Western culture while still maintaining their culture. And I think that's something that this country has never seen outside of Indian country anyway. And I really, really like that. Because frankly, too, the white guilt stuff, like I think some people are like expecting to see that and you don't get that. Because it's like too cringy at this point. And I just love too. We're getting recognition from everybody. Mindy Kaling gave this show a shout out. Non-natives will watch this simply because of Taika. Like non-indigenous people will watch this simply because people like Bobby Lee, Bill Burr are going to be in this. They're going to show up just for them. And I promise you, this show will get a season 2. Like, I'm not even worried about it. I was a little worried for Rutherford Falls, and that thankfully that got a season 2. But this one, I have zero concerns. And I'll close with this. And I apologize for my voice. It's still recovering. But what a world we live in, where Reservation Dogs and Rutherford Falls come out in the same year. Can you believe that? I still can't believe it, and hearing about all the work that's coming out soon with all the other native-led content, I can't wait. And so to close, I will close the way that Reservation Dogs opened, which was an homage to Smoke Signals. With all this awesome native content on the horizon, there's a lot to be excited about. So from Smoke Signals, as the great Randy Peone once said, it's a good day to be Indigenous. All right, everybody. Talk to you later.